Treefort Music Fest is back for 5 epic days, 400 artists, and one unforgettable adventure in downtown Boise. From March 26th through the 30th, catch Sophie Tucker, Remy Wolf, the Linda Lindas, plus experience Alefort, Dragfort, and more. Tickets start as low as $90, so buy your pass now. And remember, zipline passes get you to the front of the line all weekend. Get your tickets now at treefortmusicfest.com/tickets. Today on CityCast Boise, Governor Brad Little ignored a wave of public opposition and signed a controversial school choice tax credit bill, admitting citizen voices played only a small role in his decision. Meanwhile, grassroots protests are ramping up at the Capitol as frustrated Idahoans fight to be heard. Plus, we're talking competitive bingo and a heroic Canadian goose. It's Friday, March 7th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. It's another Friday, and joining us today is KTVB's very own Brian Holmes, host of the 208. Thanks for being here, Brian.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
I am so excited that I get to talk about these topics with you. I always love a chance to get to pick your brain. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was Governor Little signing HB 93. And you had a fantastic segment about this on the 208. For anybody who might not know or might not remember, HB 93 is the bill that would establish a tax credit for students who are going to private schools. It is Idaho's equivalent of the voucher bills that people have been talking about for a couple of years. So, Brian, I'm really curious, what is your take on the governor signing this bill? Why do you think he signed it?
Well, short answer, I think he got kind of backed into a corner by what he said during the State of the State. And also there was a social media post from the president that kind of called him out before it even got to his desk, that said specifically, congratulations, Idaho's working on this. This is going to be a great thing, and you should do this. So I think he was kind of backed into the corner with that. And that's kind of why he signed it, because, as you might remember, during his State of the State, he said, I'm setting aside $50 million for this program for school choice, or what he wanted to call, or didn't have a name for it yet, but was called eventually the Parental Choice Tax Credit Bill. He was going to set aside $50 million, but he said it has to be done the Idaho way. Fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable. And after that bill got to his desk, it went through both houses. After that bill got to his desk, he met with the media and he was asked a couple questions about it. Wouldn't answer whether or not he would sign it or not, but said the only criteria that it met was the $50 million. And 2 days later, he signed it into law. And then even when he sent out a letter that accompanied this signature, he didn't explain why. Like why he went with it, even though it didn't satisfy any of the 4 criteria that he laid out specifically in his State of the State. And so when it comes to why, we still don't know exactly why. But those are just speculation that, well, it was inevitable, he had to, because as you've seen lately, he's really kind of leaned into the Trump thing with his social media posts and celebrating all the things that are going on in Washington, trying to do the same thing and saying we've already done that or have been doing that here in Idaho.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up those 4 points, because when I had discussions about this idea of vouchers or tax credits, and I would talk to people who are Republicans, who are conservative, they all emphasize, well, it's got to meet criteria. He won't sign anything if it doesn't meet those criteria. And that did not seem to be the case at all. And so another point I want to bring up is this was not a popular bill with Idahoans, at least with the calls that the governor's office received. And you really covered that perfectly. What was the number again? How many calls did he get?
He got 37,457 phone calls to his office between the time that it was sent to his office until he signed it the following week, 5 days later. And 32,366 of those phone calls were asking him to veto this bill. And just 5,091 wanted him to sign it. So that's 86% of the people that called his office that said, please veto this bill. And he signed it anyway. And that doesn't even account for the emails that he got, because I think the Idaho Ed News, had something about this previously when it was still kind of floating around the State House, that when it was in committee, they had like 1,000 emails, and only 6% of those emails were in favor of this bill advancing. So it's very unpopular. Yet, as he said, during this meeting with the media that, well, Idaho's not a true democracy. And if it was just about who showed up, well, then that's not how this works. And so it's a representative government. Your representatives barely passed it, so I'm going to sign it.
How do you think Idahoans feel about their governor saying that we aren't a true democracy? And from appearances, it looks like he didn't really listen to what the majority of Idahoans who took the time to contact him had to say about this.
Well, I guess it depends on where you are and who you ask. I mean, it depends on what kind of group you're hanging out with. The fact that 86% made the phone call and said, don't do this, there's even both sides, and a lot of Republicans voted against this. What it says is that he's just has this kind of, not a mandate, but he was given this directive. They've been trying to do this for several years, starting back in 2019. It really got a good push in 2023. None of that came through. He explained why that he wouldn't sign any of those. But this one seemed to fit, I guess, or it was just about time. Again, we would love to ask him these questions, why he decided this was the one to do this. But each time we have asked, he's declined any sort of interview.
Do you think that this will have any impact on how Idahoans view him, potential re-election situations? Like when he is not necessarily listening to the people who are contacting him, does it seem to create political implications for him?
I think so. I mean, based on what we get sent into our newsroom and into the 208 when it comes to text messages and stuff, there's a lot of people who are like, this is unacceptable. This is, not listening is a good way to lose an election kind of thing. And we'll see, though. I guess the other side of that is, what's the alternative when it comes to his running again, which I believe he will in 2 years from now? What's the alternative? Is there a better candidate right now on that side that they can say, yeah, they're better. They are better than what we have right now? That's going to be the question. Because you could say all day long, I'm not going to vote for him again, but when you're not given a better alternative, what's going to happen when the rubber hits the road?
And that's true. He's really benefited from the fact that a lot of times his opponents are people like Ammon Bundy, where we might not like what he's doing, but I think the majority of Idahoans wouldn't necessarily be happy with a Governor Bundy. And so he's definitely benefited from just kind of flying under the radar.
Right. Or Janice McGeehan when she was lieutenant governor. And they kind of had their discrepancies while they were both in office, with her pushing out executive orders and him coming back and canceling them immediately. So, yeah, there were those alternatives. And as you said, there haven't been good ones, I guess.
We've heard from a lot of guests on the podcast, a lot of people involved in the legislature or involved with groups who are concerned about legislation working its way through the legislature, that they don't feel like they're being listened to by elected officials, that they don't feel like the Idaho representatives are listening to the people of Idaho. Do you think that's a fair assessment of this situation too?
I believe so. I mean, because this can go back to the library bill last year. There was a lot of people that said, we don't want this to pass. We don't want this to be signed. Same thing. Similar phone calls to the governor's office where the majority were very much against him signing this bill. They were very much against it even advancing in the House, and yet it did. And so we hear all the time about this outside money coming in and influencing Idaho elections and whatever. But you also have to wonder, okay, how much of this outside money, if a lot of the people on the inside are saying, please don't do this, where's this influence coming from that makes these lawmakers say, yeah, but we think you should. And we think we should do it this way. So that's the question. And you can look it up on donations and see who is contributing to their campaigns and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can get into wormholes that way. But a lot of that is also hidden. There's several, you have to really know what you're looking for is my point. And if you don't, then you can look at that and go, oh, that seems legit. And 3 steps away, it's not so legit.
Therapy isn't just about talking, it's about transformation. And Clover Care Consulting's thoughtful approach can help you embrace yourself with a fresh perspective. Founder Christine Aaron, a licensed clinical social worker and veteran, understands how trauma and the stress of everyday life can weigh on you. From traditional therapy modalities to guided meditation and sound baths, she provides a comforting space where you can explore, heal, and reconnect with yourself. Christine understands that healing isn't just about facing your struggles, it's about feeling supported through them. So Clover Care Consulting will also work to connect clients with community resources and support systems that empower you as you work through broader life challenges. Whether you're looking for a peaceful in-person session in the Treasure Valley or the convenience and flexibility of a telehealth visit, Clover Care Consulting is focused on your well-being. Book your first session today at Clovercare, the number 4, the letter U.com. That's clovercareforyou.com.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Piggybacking off this idea that are our elected officials actually listening to Idahoans when they push these bills, these proposals, when they're signing things into law, when they're voting? I also want to talk about some grassroots movements that I've been seeing in the state, nationally, but I really want to focus on what's happening in the state. And one of those is the 50-51 movement. And they just had a protest this week. They've had several protests, and they seem to be getting more and more traction, kind of building momentum all the time. And I want to talk about them, but I'm also really curious, Brian, do you feel like these grassroots movements, these protests, are directly related to this feeling that a lot of Idahoans seem to have that our elected officials are not listening?
Yeah, the 50-51 thing is a good example of that. It started, as you said, as a national kind of let's stand up and say, hold on a second to what's happening nationally with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all of the cuts and all that kind of stuff. But if you show up to these protests, like at this Idaho Capitol, you could see there's a lot of that localized fervor as well. There's a lot of people talking about what's happening locally and not just focusing on the national stuff. But yes, the not being heard, wait, you're not considering our thoughts, what we want to have happen when it comes to both this bill, several bills. Medicaid is also being considered again. It's had 3 versions going through the State House so far. But just those kind of things of like, wait a second, we didn't send you here to do these things, yet you're doing them. And so the only way we seem to be able to get to your attention, because emails, phone calls, knocking on your office door doesn't seem to work, is we're just going to gather in groups and try to get your attention that way. And they've done it on weekdays. They usually, sometimes those protests are held on the weekends because obviously more people can, make it that way. But the fact that they're holding them on the weekdays makes it so, hey, those guys are in that building, and so they can see what we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this last protest, I was there, and they specifically talked about, like, they're here, they're in the building. Let's make sure that they hear us. They can ignore our emails, they can ignore our phone calls. They can't ignore us if we come to their place of work that is our house and we let them know how we feel. And do you think that will have an effect on how representatives act or view these issues?
History tells us not really, no. You being there, let me ask you this. How many came out? How many legislators came out and interacted, listened, and had, a few minutes out there to hear what was going on? Any of them?
A handful. Yeah. Ilana Rubel did come out, but
that's one side of the party.
Yeah, that's one side of the aisle.
Of the aisle, excuse me. Yes. So, and that's not unusual, but it's the ones, they have very little sway in there. So it's the other Republicans, even the moderate Republicans. How many of them came out and said, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to try to do my best to do what you want us to do, kind of thing. It doesn't happen that often. So how much sway it will have, I think it goes back to the what the governor said. He could say that I put some weight into it, but again, it's not a true democracy, and it's not about who shows up.
So what in your perspective, or with what you've been covering, are effective ways that Idahoans could make their voice heard? Or is this just going to be kind of a slog of having to elect new officials if we feel they aren't listening to us?
And that's kind of has been the trend, because with these bills that have been coming in are outside ideas, whether it's school choice, whether it's library bills, whether it's all of these culture war ideas with transgender stuff, that's all coming from the outside. And what they tried to do previously, I'll use the library bill as an example, When that wasn't getting passed, they basically primaried a bunch of Republicans that put a stop to it. So whether or not that can swing the other way, where people say, hold on a second, don't touch Medicaid, and now we're doing this, public money for private education, is that enough to swing it back the other way? I don't know. It's hard to tell, but that does seem to be the only way to do that, because they made those changes, and now all of a sudden these bills are going through.
And I definitely want to make sure and, circle back to something that you touched on. I've attended each of these protests, and at the beginning, most of the signs were about Trump, about national level things, about Elon Musk. And this last protest this week, the vast majority of signs had something to do with Idaho or things that are affecting people much more directly than things happening on the national scene, or things that they have more influence over. We have more influence over our city government, our state government, as opposed to national issues. Do you think with this trend that we're seeing of officials not listening, that people are feeling more motivated to get involved and try to make their voices heard?
I think so. I mean, by the looks of it, as you said, they've gotten bigger every time they've held one of these protests, and more people have shown up, which is kind of indicative of like where everybody's leaning, and like their frustration, and like we have to do something. And we don't have an election right now. I mean, there's not one coming up anytime soon. So this is their only way of making their voices heard. And so that's kind of how it works. I don't know how much it will play into whether it matters. They're kind of, as you said, nobody's really coming out to engage and really figure out what's the problem and what do we need to fix. They just keep going. So I don't know where that breaking point is. And by the time we get to the next election, is the fervor all going to have died down by then? I don't know.
There was one group that I feel like has been semi-successful at this point, and there was a whammy bill, a bill about the Idaho medical training that we have in this state. And there was a protest at the Capitol with that group, and the bill got held and now was changed. So do you think there are spaces and ways that protests or this public outcry is having an impact on how the legislators look at issues?
Yes. And what keeps surprising me is time and time again, they show up in committee with these bills and somebody says, well, have you spoken to the people that might be infected by this, or those that actually have an expert opinion on this? And a majority of the time they say, no, this is just something we came up with because we thought this was a good idea. But when it comes to whammy, when people said, hold on a second, you're telling me you want to get rid of a medical school program that brings doctors to Idaho. We're already last when it comes to doctors per capita. And now you want to put a stop to that and start something over from scratch, something that we've been building for the last 50 years. And you want to just turn it around in 2 years and start. I think that did get people's attention. Like, wait a second, this doesn't make a lot of sense. The fact that they have another bill, though, that is still going to kind of tweak it a little bit, still tells me that there's something else at play here, that it's not just about, well, we need more seats, we want more people, want more doctors, because this one would remove 10 seats from the whammy program and still kind of point them to the direction of beginning another one, which I don't get it. So it is, in my opinion, 100% based on the abortion laws here in Idaho.
And for anybody who's listening and thinking, man, I never know when the protests are, and you really want to get out there with the people, something that is near and dear to the hearts of Idahoans is our public lands. And there is an Idaho Rally for Public Lands on March 22nd from 11 a.m. to noon at the Idaho Capitol steps. So if that's something that you're concerned about the direction we're heading with our public lands, that might be a chance to get out and try to make your voice heard with like-minded people.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Can you feel it in the air? That sudden shift of mood? It's the perfect time to shed the winter blues and experience the revitalizing qualities of driving a Lincoln. It starts with the Lincoln Spring Sales Event. So step outside and visit your local Lincoln retailer or Lincoln.com for some seriously mood-enhancing offers on current and past Lincoln models. Your transformation awaits. Learn more at Lincoln.com.
Okay, Brian, there's always a lot going on every week in this state. So we like to end with our picks of the week. Maybe something uplifting or fun or interesting. It can be a lot of different things. But what is your pick of the week this week?
I'm going to go with bingo. Believe it or not. I know, hold on, hang with me here. It sounds like an old person thing. I know. And it sounds like something you would only do to raise money for your local church. But bingo is actually kind of intense and it's kind of fun, but you got to know what you're doing, believe it or not. The good side is that there are people there who do it a lot and they're willing to help you. The funny thing about it is my wife and I went this last week and we got there and it was crowded, which was, again, first shock. Secondly, when you sit next to people that are really into it, they don't like you sitting next to them.
Oh.
Because you're bringing some sort of juju that they're not like, this is my space. This is how I do this every week. And people have routines and they have knickknacks and like luck charms and all that kind of stuff out there. And if you disrupt that vibe at all, they're not really happy with you. So first key is to find a good spot to sit who's next to somebody who might help you. But the cool thing is you can actually win some cash, which is a lot of fun, which my wife did. She won twice playing bingo.
Whoa.
It was pretty amazing. And get this, so she won the second to last game. I was one number away from winning the last game, but I didn't call out bingo soon enough. And so I did not win.
That sounds high stakes.
Yeah, we could have walked out of there with like $1,000. It was crazy.
Okay, so where are you playing this really intense competitive bingo?
They used to be over on Glenwood, and now they moved up to the bench on Overland across from the golf course.
Do they have a name or is this kind of an underground thing? Do I need a password?
Boise bingo, I guess. And people are probably wondering, how can you gamble in a town? But they're connected to, I think, Opera, Idaho. And so that's where their proceeds go. So it's for a nonprofit.
I think that sounds really, really fun. I don't think I've played bingo since elementary school, but I'm down for it. Especially like this high stakes, ultra competitive, like take my mind off current events. I can win money.
And it's more than just 5 in a row. You got to design patterns and you got to blackouts. There's all kinds of games. It's fun.
Okay, so my pick of the week was, Brian, you gotta let me know if you saw this. There on Lake Ontario, there was a nature photographer just taking a picture of this goose, as nature photographers are wont to do.
Sure.
And as he was taking pictures, he noticed this bald eagle all of a sudden was going in for the attack to attack this goose. And the photographer thought, oh no, that's the end of this goose, right? Like, I also would think that. But no, this goose for 20 minutes fought off this eagle.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can watch it. You can watch it on YouTube. It's everywhere. Just look up like Canadian goose fights off bald eagle. And okay, I have been known to be a bit of a goose hater.
Who isn't?
I've had some bad run-ins. But after this story, you know what? Maybe we are all geese today. And when you look it up, there are a whole bunch of articles talking about maybe the symbolism or, that's really interesting. And I love that. So anyway, my pick of the week is this Canadian goose on Lake Ontario. Like, good job, buddy.
I'm sure you're not missing out on the whole Canada, America, bald eagle, Canada, geese, one attacking the other one fighting them off, tariffs, all that kind of stuff. That's not lost on you, right?
Oh, yeah, no, that's why I love it. That's why I love it. Like, geese on the greenbelt, no thank you. Goose fighting off bald eagle, yes. Yep. I love that. So I'm hoping we can all take that energy into the weekend. Just think about that goose. That goose was getting attacked by an eagle and it won.
Well, as anybody, as you said, Ann Morrison Park, walking through there, just minding your own business, those geese are tough. And they will not mess around with you in their territory.
Oh, absolutely. When I was in nursing school, there would be geese on the top of like St. Luke's. Mm-hmm. And so when we go in for our clinicals, they'd be like dive bombing the nursing students. And one time, one of my colleagues, one of my, nursing cohort, like goose running at her, wings spread, ready to attack. She had to like punch it in the face. It was wild. It was a wild moment. Wow. Just trying to get into clinicals. So those geese are fierce.
Yeah, they don't joke around. I mean, kids grow up petrified of them.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you breaking down all of these topics and letting us in on your insight on some of these things and letting me know about really fun competitive bingo.
You bet. If you walk away with anything today, know that bingo is the place to be on a Saturday night.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Francisco Kilgore, Selena C.A. Reynolds, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is The Down Is The. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back with another episode of Capital Chatter on Monday. You won't want to miss it.